Honestly, Eliza, let's be brutal for a moment. You're simply too plain, too heavy, and frankly too ugly for success in any field that requires visibility. Stick to your spreadsheets. That's your strength. The hook was delivered by my sister, Serena, with the surgical precision of a woman who had spent 30 years cultivating perfection. We were standing in the opulent dressing room of her new Beverly Hills home, a space more luxurious than my entire New York apartment, and she was adjusting the diamond necklace gifted by her husband, Marcus, a rising star in corporate finance. Serena's 30th birthday party was the current event trigger, a glittering showcase of her flawless life, designed to remind everyone, especially me, of her unassailable position. My name is Eliza Kane. I was 27, and I felt the words land like physical blows, twisting the decade-old knot of self-loathing tighter in my stomach. Serena, 3 years my senior, was the physical manifestation of beauty culture, tall, slender, blonde, and possessing the kind of symmetrical face that demanded attention. I was her shadow, average height, quiet, obsessed with data models, and cursed with a perpetually tired expression and curves that never seemed to fit the fashion ideal. The context and character intro was simple. I was the strategist, Serena was the trophy. I had excelled academically, obtaining degrees in behavioral psychology and advanced market analytics. I worked tirelessly behind the scenes for a major New York marketing firm, specializing in developing global brand identities. My job was powerful, invisible, and highly lucrative. Serena, meanwhile, had leveraged her looks and social capital to secure a prestigious life, defined by her husband's rising wealth and her own effortless glamour. The background conflict was the decades of cruel comparison. Our mother, Victoria, had exacerbated the tension, making it clear early on that Serena was the family's investment in aesthetic capital. "No one looks past the packaging, Eliza," Mom had stated repeatedly. "Serena has the packaging. You need to focus on what happens behind the packaging." I took that advice to heart, burying myself in code and data, building my professional worth where physical appearance was irrelevant. "I am sticking to my strengths, Serena," I replied, my voice low and steady despite the tremor in my hands. I manage multi-million-dollar budgets and determine global market penetration strategies. "My visibility is completely unnecessary." Serena laughed, a bright, mocking sound as she tilted her head, admiring her reflection. "Necessary for you, darling? Maybe not, but the people who achieve real success, the CEOs, the global faces, they are magnetic. They look the part. You can run the numbers all you want, but you will always be the genius hidden in the back office. And frankly, that's fine. Someone has to analyze the spreadsheets. Just don't pretend you could ever be the face." The sting was overwhelming. That night, at the party, the humiliation scene continued in public. Every well-meaning guest who asked me about my career received the same dismissive summation from my sister. "Oh, Eliza, she handles the back-end stuff. Making sure the graphics load. It's a very niche role." My parents, Mom and Dad, Arthur, observed the exchanges with a serene acceptance, content that their daughters had finally found their respective, unequal places in the world, the visible star and the invisible support system. I left the party early, the metallic scent of expensive champagne mixing with the acrid taste of my own shame. Back in my quiet, non-judgmental apartment in New York, I stared at my reflection. My strong, intelligent face, my honest eyes, my soft chin, all assets I valued professionally, were, by my family's measure, just obstacles to be overcome. It was time for the silent strategist to make a move. The weeks following Serena's party became a crucible. I channeled the decade of hurt into a singular professional focus. Project Phoenix. I worked as creative director for Aurora Cosmetics, a luxury, but aging skincare brand owned by a massive holding group. My current task was simple: reinvent the brand's global image and capture the lucrative younger market that prioritized authenticity over airbrushed perfection. I pitched Project Phoenix to the Aurora board, a radical, multi-million-dollar campaign centered not on an established supermodel, but on a face that was real, flawed, and intelligent. A face that embodied the brand's new ethos of achievable, data-driven beauty. The search for the face was exhaustive, spanning 3 continents. We interviewed hundreds of candidates, but none possessed the specific combination of quiet confidence, intelligence, and approachable vulnerability I was seeking. The board was pressuring me, The launch date was firm. One late night, after a fruitless week of casting calls, I was reviewing the final mood boards. Marcus, my CEO, a shrewd, visionary woman who understood my strategic mind, entered my office. "Eliza," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You designed this campaign. You wrote the manifesto. You defined the market. Why are we still looking? The face needs to be the embodiment of the strategy. It needs to be the person who truly believes that intelligence is the new allure." I looked up at her, exhausted. "Because that person is invisible, Marcus. She works behind the scenes, not in front of the camera." Marcus walked over to the mood board, stopping directly in front of the largest image. A portrait of a woman with a slightly asymmetrical face, dark, intelligent eyes, and a quiet, formidable strength. It was a digitally optimized portrait of me, used only for internal design concepts. "That face," Marcus stated, tapping the image, "has the strength of a strategist and the vulnerability of a human being. It doesn't scream perfection. It whispers authenticity. We can't afford another blonde goddess, Eliza. We need a quiet revolution. We need the architect to be the architecture." The thought was terrifying, professionally risky, and profoundly ironic. My sister's cruel words, "too ugly for success," "stick to spreadsheets," screamed in my mind. But the strategist in me instantly recognized the value. The cost of hiring a top-tier celebrity model was astronomical. The cost of hiring myself was zero, and the marketing story was pure, unmanufactured authenticity. I took a deep breath. "The contract would need ironclad NDAs, Marcus. No personal details released. The brand is the focus, not the background story." "Agreed," she smiled. "But the face is yours. Welcome to the spotlight, Eliza." The transformation was quiet and intense. For 6 weeks, I balanced my duties as creative director with my new secret role as the face of Project Phoenix. The campaign was renamed Aura, the architect of your own allure. The photographs, taken by a trusted team in a closed studio, highlighted the quiet power in my gaze, the subtle curves of my body, and the texture of my skin. The final images were stunning because they were real. They didn't rely on digital manipulation. They relied on strategic lighting and raw, unvarnished intelligence. The global launch was scheduled to coincide with Serena's biggest professional event of the year, the International Finance Summit Gala in New York, where Marcus was receiving a coveted industry award. My entire family, Mom, Dad, Serena, and Marcus, would be there. I, too, would be there, officially as Marcus's lead strategist, but secretly as the face about to launch 1,000 billboards. The day of the International Finance Summit Gala arrived. The tension in the air was electric, a mixture of high finance and competitive social display. My parents and Serena had flown in, staying in a penthouse suite overlooking Times Square, a location that would soon become very significant. I met them for a brief pre-gala cocktail hour in their suite. Serena, radiant in a custom emerald gown, surveyed me with her usual critical gaze. "You look acceptable, Eliza," she conceded, clearly disappointed I hadn't shown up in something shabby. "Though your dress is terribly conservative. You should try more color. And honestly, those dark circles under your eyes? You look exhausted. Stick to your 8 hours, darling. You won't find a man staring at a spreadsheet all night." "The dark circles are from managing a global launch, Serena. And I'm not looking for a man," I replied, sipping sparkling water. Dad, Arthur, intervened. "Serena is right, Eliza. Tonight is about visibility. Marcus and Serena are making connections. You need to learn to network face-to-face, not through a keyboard. That's how you move from the back office to the corner office." They were utterly consumed by their own narrative of visible success. They had no idea that the global launch I mentioned was theirs, and the connections they sought would soon be seeking me. The gala itself was held in a massive, historic hall. I navigated the sea of tailored suits and glittering diamonds with quiet efficiency, ensuring Marcus's presentation ran flawlessly. Serena, meanwhile, worked the room, her voice bright and practiced, introducing herself as Mrs. Marcus Sterling, daughter of Arthur Kane. I excused myself right before Marcus's award presentation. The digital launch window, the moment Project Phoenix went live across all global platforms, was T-minus 5 minutes. I found a quiet alcove near the main exit, my private communications officer, Lena, waiting. She held a sleek tablet displaying a countdown timer and a global deployment map. 5 seconds, Eliza, Lena whispered, her eyes shining with excitement. New York, London, Tokyo, Dubai, all synced, and the Times Square billboard is live. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the point of no return. The timer hit 0. Lena's tablet exploded with confirmations. The Aurora website was updated, the campaign images were live across social media, and the first wave of pre-ordered products had shipped. Confirmation on the Times Square superboard, Lena breathed, her voice awestruck. It's huge. It's unavoidable. It's glorious. I nodded, my breath catching. Thank you, Lena. Go. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I walked back towards the main hall, just as Marcus concluded his acceptance speech to a thunderous round of applause. Then the murmuring started. A low, persistent wave of distraction rippled through the room. People began pulling out their phones, whispering, and turning their attention toward the massive, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. I found my family, Mom, Dad, and Serena, clustered near the windows, waiting for the crowd to dissipate so they could resume their networking. Serena, looking annoyed by the disruption, pulled out her own phone to check the local news feed. And then she saw it. Through the massive window, dominating the New York skyline, a gigantic full-motion advertisement had just taken over the largest digital billboard in the city. The display was breathtaking. A stark white background, a bold logo, Aura, the architect of your own allure, and a single enormous face filling the screen. It was my face. The strategic lighting highlighted the intelligence in my eyes, the slight asymmetry in my cheekbones, the quiet confidence that the data models had defined as authentic allure. The image held the gaze of everyone in the room. It was not a photo of perfection. It was a photo of unyielding professional strength. Serena gasped, a raw, shocked sound that cut through the surrounding whispers. She stumbled back, dropping her phone. No, she whispered, her voice cracking. No, it can't be. That's you. The revelation was immediate and physically impossible to ignore. My parents, Arthur and Victoria, turned from the window to stare at me. The quiet woman in the conservative dress, then back at the gigantic, unavoidable image dominating the skyline. Eliza, what is this? Dad demanded, his voice thick with confusion and sudden dawning terror. Is this a prank? A viral stunt for your firm? No, Dad, I replied, standing still, allowing them to absorb the full, devastating reality. That is the global launch campaign for Aura Cosmetics, Project Phoenix, and I am the face of it. Serena was shaking, her emerald dress suddenly looking cheap and fragile against the backdrop of my towering success. You can't be. You said you managed the spreadsheets. You said you were the one hiding in the back office. You're too ugly for the camera. You're correct, Serena, I said, my voice cutting through her panicked hysteria. I am the one who managed the spreadsheets. I am the one who determined that the market had reached saturation with manufactured perfection. I created the entire campaign, the strategy, the budget, and the messaging. And when we realized that the face needed to embody the strategy, authentic, intelligent, and unyielding, the data pointed to the architect. I looked directly at my mother, Victoria, who was crying now, the tears of a woman whose entire belief system had just shattered. I took your advice, Mom. I focused on what happens behind the packaging, and what happens behind the packaging is that the strategist owns the entire platform. The turning of tables was complete. I was no longer the invisible, quiet daughter. I was the undeniable, globally exposed force that now commanded the attention of the entire room. Marcus, my CEO, walked over, a proud smile on her face, and extended her hand to me in front of the assembled financiers. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced, pulling me forward, allow me to introduce the true face of our revolution. Eliza Kane, the creative director who launched the future of beauty. The woman you see on that billboard is the strategic genius who just secured a $3 billion valuation for Aurora. The applause was immediate, thunderous, and directed solely at me. Serena and my parents were left standing alone by the window, watching the visible proof of my victory blaze across the New York night. The long-term consequences of that night were profound, systematic, and targeted at the very foundation of my family's identity: visibility and manufactured prestige. The corporate fallout and contractual reality. The next morning, the financial world buzzed with the news. Aurora's stock skyrocketed. My personal visibility and professional demand became immense. I had executed the greatest risk of my career, and the payoff was astronomical. The immediate impact was felt by Marcus, Serena's husband, whose corporate finance firm had been trying to pitch Aurora for a major advisory contract. I met Marcus 2 days later, not at the firm, but in my new, opulent corner office, a space I deliberately secured not for the square footage, but for the stunning view of the city skyline, where my face was now a permanent fixture. "Eliza, this is incredible," Marcus said, trying to maintain his corporate composure, "but I need to understand the contract details. The visibility. How long are you committed to being the face?" "The contract is 3 years, Marcus," I replied, gesturing toward the enormous digital canvas outside where my image shifted slightly, the background now showing an Aurora product. "And it's not a modeling contract. It's a creative partnership executive agreement. I maintain full creative control, and my compensation is tied directly to global revenue, not just appearances." Marcus swallowed hard. "I tried to call Serena. She's distraught. She feels betrayed. She said she thought you were just playing a trick." "Serena saw what she needed to see. A sister she could diminish to elevate herself," I stated. "She now sees the reality. I used her perception of my failure to execute the largest, most successful launch of the decade. Her feelings are irrelevant to my operational strategy." Then, I delivered the second blow. The professional consequence that ruined his marriage. "Your firm, Sterling and Associates, pitched us for the advisory contract, Marcus. I reviewed your proposal personally." He leaned forward eagerly. "And we're the best in the business. We can handle the projected growth." "No," I stated flatly. "Your proposal was rejected. I chose to partner with a competitor." "Why?" "Because your firm's entire operational model relies on the appearance of prestige and a reliance on old networks. Your success is built on the exact outdated principles that KRG failed with. I need a firm built on digital agility and data-driven equity. I can't risk the future of a multi-billion-dollar brand on the kind of ego-driven finance that you and my father embody." He looked utterly shocked. "But your sister, my wife, she pushed that proposal heavily. She used her family name, and that, Marcus, was precisely the problem. I need clean contracts, not emotional leverage. You built your life on Serena's aesthetic capital and my father's outdated legacy. I built mine on competence, and competence is who I hire." Marcus left my office, his career hanging by a thread, his marriage about to implode because the contract he needed to secure his future had been lost to the cold, professional judgment of the woman his wife had called too ugly for success. The fall of the golden child, Serena. The fallout between Serena and Marcus was swift and brutal. The loss of the Aurora contract, combined with the humiliation of her sister becoming an undeniable icon, destroyed their marriage. Serena's social identity was entirely wrapped up in Marcus's financial success and her own visible perfection. When the money stream dried up and her husband blamed her for the failed negotiation, her world shattered. She called me 3 weeks later from a sterile-sounding hotel room. She wasn't crying hysterically. She was cold, calculating, and completely ruined. "You knew, Eliza. You knew what that contract meant to Marcus. You did this on purpose to destroy me." "I did this on purpose to launch a $3 billion brand, Serena. Your destruction was merely a necessary side effect of your own sustained cruelty and lack of foresight," I corrected her. "You spent your life defining me by my flaws. I spent mine defining myself by my results. The outcome was predictable. But the face, why the face?" she demanded, the question still burning at the core of her vanity. "You could have hired anyone. You did it to mock me." "No. I became the face because the strategist must embody the strategy. The campaign is authenticity, Serena. It's about showing that the face of a global brand can be intelligent, human, and real. Every model we cast screamed perfect fabrication. You had trained me to believe that my reality was too flawed to ever be visible. I used that flaw to become revolutionary. You taught me a lesson in invisibility, and I turned that invisibility into inescapable visibility." I hung up, severing the last direct link to her emotional tyranny. She lost the house, the social circle, and the perceived stability of her future. The parents' reckoning, Arthur and Victoria. My parents, Arthur and Victoria, tried to adapt. They flew to New York, bearing bouquets and apologies, attempting to claim credit for my inner strength. "We always knew you were smart, Eliza. We just wanted you to be practical. Now you have it all. Mom cried, hugging me fiercely in my office. You always knew I was smart, Mom, I said, pulling back gently. But you never believed I could be successful without fitting your aesthetic ideal. You prioritized Serena's vanity over my sanity. I forgave the comparison long ago, but I will not forget the professional negligence. Dad, Arthur, finally confessed the true burden he carried. I'm sorry, Eliza. I thought I was protecting you from the brutal world of visibility. I saw how beautiful Serena was, and I knew you didn't have that shield. I thought you'd be happier hidden. You confused hiding with competence, Dad. And you confused a shield with a cage, I said. I didn't need your protection. I needed your belief. I had to earn my visibility, while Serena took hers for granted. That difference is the difference between an asset and a liability. I secured their financial comfort. I owed them that much for my education. But I restricted their access to my life. I would not allow their attempts at belated pride to contaminate the peace I had finally earned. The final global presence, 5 years later, Aura Cosmetics was the dominant force in the global beauty market. And I, Eliza Kane, creative director and face of the campaign, was featured not just on billboards, but on the covers of Vogue and Forbes, a rare combination of beauty and business journalism. My success was unassailable. Serena, divorced and working a desperate, low-paying job in social media, occasionally sent me emails, always routing them through my corporate communications office. I never replied. Her life was the quiet ruin she had predicted for mine. I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse, overlooking the entire city. My face, my real, strong, intelligent face, smiled down from the Times Square superboard. The light caught the subtle lines around my eyes, lines earned through long nights of work, lines that Serena had mocked. I didn't just find success. I redefined it. I proved that the ugly girl could not only be successful, but she could become the ultimate face of success, simply by realizing that true allure was a data model, and she was the only one with the intelligence to run it. I had replaced aesthetic capital with intellectual capital, and the market confirmed my valuation was superior. The moral closure was absolute. The sister who sought to ruin me with shallow insults became the living proof of my strategic genius. My revenge was not destroying her, but professionally absorbing the market she failed to understand, using the flaw she identified to become the architect of my own, undeniable global destiny. The success of Project Phoenix was so profound that it became a Harvard Business School case study within a year. I was flown back and forth across the globe, not just for photo shoots, but for keynote speeches on market disruption. The irony became a recurring theme in my public life. The strategist who became the accidental model. The demands of my dual role were intense. I spent months traveling, overseeing international campaign rollouts in Tokyo, Paris, and Dubai. Every airport, every train station, every major shopping district seemed to feature my image, the face of the architect of your own allure. My simple, honest features were instantly recognizable, a stark contrast to the airbrushed perfection that still dominated 99% of advertising. This high-visibility life completely undermined my family's old framework. My father's old friends and business associates constantly saw me, not Serena, on television and in print. Arthur was forced to awkwardly navigate a social world where his back-office daughter was now exponentially more visible, influential, and powerful than his golden heir. One particular moment cemented this shift. I was giving a televised interview with a major financial news network, discussing Aurora's projected revenue. The interviewer, a prominent finance journalist known for his sharp questions, asked about my unexpected transition to the public eye. Ms. Kane, your success is remarkable, but your background in strategic logistics is unusual for a brand face. Was there a moment, perhaps a personal challenge, that drove you to take such a public risk? I smiled, looking directly into the camera, the same honest, unyielding gaze captured in the billboard. There was. Someone very close to me once defined my worth based on physical appearance and told me I was too ugly for success in any role that required visibility. At the time it was painful, but I realized that I had a choice. I could remain invisible and prove them right, or I could use that flawed perception as the engine for a revolutionary brand. The market was hungry for authenticity, for a face that looked like it had spent time in a spreadsheet, not just a salon. I chose to use the insult as my strategy. I didn't name Serena, but the context was clear. The interview clip went viral. It instantly elevated the campaign from a beauty launch to a cultural moment about self-worth and defying shallow expectations. Serena's reaction was predictable. She didn't call to apologize. She called my chief counsel, Marcus, demanding that I retract the statement, claiming it was defamation and ruining her reputation. Marcus, who now viewed the Kane family with utter disdain, simply forwarded her email to me with a note. Professional advice: use her rage for the next European campaign launch. I did exactly that. The next campaign rollout focused on the theme: no filter, no apology. The images were even more powerful, emphasizing my natural features and quiet confidence. Serena, unable to secure any meaningful employment in the city due to her damaged reputation and lack of demonstrable professional skills, was forced to move back into my parents' home. Her return was not a comforting reunion, but an agonizing, continuous reminder of her professional and marital failure. She saw her life shrink to the walls of the home she had escaped, while my image spanned continents. My mother, Victoria, found herself trapped between her lifelong belief in aesthetic prestige and the undeniable, overwhelming reality of my financial dominance. She tried to incorporate my success into the family narrative, desperately hosting small tea parties to show off copies of Vogue with my face on the cover. See Mrs. Henderson? Our Eliza! We always knew she was remarkable, but she had to find her own path, you see. That intelligence, that quiet strength. But the guests weren't fooled. They saw the desperation. They saw that the daughter who was supposed to be the support system now commanded $1 billion brand, while the golden daughter sat upstairs, ruined and unemployed, the living symbol of the family's outdated values. My final deliberate professional move regarding my family involved Marcus, Serena's ex-husband. Marcus, now professionally isolated, made a final desperate plea to me. He asked me to use my influence to secure him a position in the financial sector, promising me complete loyalty and discretion. I agreed to meet him at a downtown cafe, neutral, public territory. He arrived looking thin and stressed, his expensive suit now seeming more like a costume than a statement of wealth. Eliza, I know I have no right, Marcus began, his voice lowered. But I need help. My firm is gone. My reputation is poisoned. If I could just have one contract, one advisory role, I can rebuild. I'm brilliant with corporate finance. You know that. I know you are brilliant with corporate finance, Marcus, I replied, sipping my tea. But I also know that you allowed your wife's jealousy to influence a negotiation that cost my company millions in potential advisory fees. You prioritized emotional security over professional integrity. That is a flaw I cannot forgive in a business partner. Then, I delivered the final professional blow. However, I have secured a position for you, not in corporate finance. My holding company, Nexus Strategies, recently acquired a small, struggling logistics firm in the Midwest. They need a chief financial officer to manage the initial restructuring and cost analysis. It's high travel, low prestige, and the compensation is less than a quarter of your former salary. But it is stable, and it offers a chance to prove your competence away from the glare of New York. Marcus looked devastated. It was a massive demotion, a job designed for a mid-level executive, not a former partner. You're sending me to the Midwest? Why? Because, Marcus, you need to learn that real competence operates away from the spotlight, in the quiet reality of spreadsheets and optimization models. The visibility you sought was conditional. The stability I offer is earned, and it ensures that Serena will never be able to leverage your position against me again. You are rebuilding your life in a place where your wife's aesthetic capital is utterly worthless. It's a safe, functional position, and you report, indirectly, to me. He took the job. He had no choice. My moral closure was achieved completely. My sister, the embodiment of visible perfection, ended up living in the house she once mocked me for, dependent on the parents whose values she failed to uphold. Her ex-husband, Marcus, spent his days in a quiet, anonymous office, managing the logistics for a company owned by the woman his former wife had called too ugly for success. I continued to thrive, using my unique data-driven visibility to launch new brands and acquire new assets. I didn't just win. I absorbed their entire worldview, replacing their shallow definitions of beauty and success with the undeniable, measurable power of my own professional competence. I looked in the mirror one morning, seeing the strong, intelligent woman who smiled from billboards across the world, and knew that the only validation I ever needed was the one I bought with my own genius. My career was no longer hidden. It was the global face of a new reality. The final, lasting impact of the takeover rippled through the family's emotional landscape for years. Serena, trapped back in the large, suffocating family home, became a fixture of pathetic attempts at reclaiming status. She tried several times to launch an online lifestyle brand, leveraging her former visibility and beauty. Predictably, every venture failed. She lacked the strategic discipline, the data analysis, and the sheer work ethic that sustained professional success. Her content was glossy but hollow, and the audience, trained by my campaign to crave authenticity, quickly dismissed her as manufactured artifice. The irony was a persistent daily torture for her. She was rejected by the very market whose standards she had once upheld. My mother, Victoria, finally broke the cycle of silence and denial. She began attending therapy, initially at my father's insistence after realizing the depth of the emotional damage she had inflicted. She confessed years later, during a rare, mediated family session, that she had loved Serena's beauty because it was a tangible, easily presentable form of success that shielded her from external judgment. My intelligence, my quiet strength, was too abstract, too hard to show off. I was selfish, Eliza, she admitted, her voice trembling. I used Serena's face as my own shield, and I suppressed your genius because I was afraid of anything I couldn't immediately understand or control. You were right. I confused a shield with love. I accepted the apology, but I never sought reconciliation in the traditional sense. I maintained a professional, respectful distance. I continued to fund my parents' comfortable life, ensuring their stability, but I never allowed them to cross the emotional boundary again. They were granted financial peace, but they were permanently excluded from my operational reality. Arthur, my father, became my quiet, distant cheerleader. He would cut out every magazine article, every interview, every Forbes mention of my success, placing them in a meticulously ordered binder. He never showed it to anyone, but I knew he kept it. It was his private, silent admission of the colossal mistake he had made. He never again spoke a dismissive word about technology or spreadsheets. He had learned, too late, that the most valuable asset is often the one you cannot see. My life continued to escalate in success. After the initial 3-year contract, I stepped back from being the primary face of Aura Cosmetics, transitioning entirely into the role of Chief Global Brand Strategist, the ultimate power behind the curtain. I had proved my point, and now I could return to my natural habitat, the data lab. I hired a diverse array of models, faces of different ages, colors, and body types, faces that truly represented the authentic beauty I had championed. My legacy was secure. The true final victory occurred when I hosted a major global strategy meeting in the former Aurora, headquarters in Los Angeles, a building I had successfully lobbied to purchase and remodel, entirely with sustainable design principles. I stood in the massive, curved glass boardroom, surrounded by my executives, discussing the next phase of our global expansion. The conversation was high-level, data-driven, and focused entirely on competence. As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus, my former brother-in-law and now a quiet, efficient CFO of the struggling logistics firm I owned, called in via video conference to deliver the quarterly financial stability report. He looked tired but competent, having earned his stability the hard way. "The numbers look strong, Ms. Kane," he reported, his voice crisp and professional. "We're exceeding projections on cost optimization by 4% this quarter, thanks to the new predictive modeling software." "Excellent, Marcus. Keep up the disciplined work," I replied. When the call ended, my chief technology officer looked at me, impressed. "He's good, Eliza. You got a diamond in the rough there. But how did you find him?" I smiled, looking out the massive window at the city. He used to be a commodity defined by his associations. I simply put him in an environment where his only value was his competence. He learned to value the hidden work. I never saw Serena again. Her attempts at communication ceased entirely when she realized the full, permanent nature of my professional boundary. She was last heard of managing a small local boutique, a job that required her to be visible and polite, using the exact shallow charm she had once weaponized against me. But for minimal pay and zero status, She became the perpetual supporting character in a life that should have been hers, forced to live out the narrative she had once designed for me. I, Eliza Kane, the girl who was too ugly for success, retired my final grudge. My life was now a monument to the power of self-defined worth, built on the solid foundation of billions of dollars, global influence, and the knowledge that I alone had authored my destiny, unburdened by the shallow judgment of the past. The greatest revenge was the simple, unassailable fact that the whole world now recognized my face, but only for the mind behind it.